Hey, Reef Builders, welcome back to another session of Reef Therapy. My name is Remy. We are on location today at Vibrant Coral and Fish with Mr. Caleb. We thought we'd get a quick podcast in because you're a wholesaler, and that's a whole different side of this ball game. That's a whole different side of the supply chain. But before we get into that, while we're here, why don't you tell everybody about yourself? I think you have an interesting story about where you grew up and all that. So take us through your life and then how you got into the hobby.
Sure. So, a little atypical in the sense that I did not grow up in the U.S. I was born in Hong Kong, and I lived in China for the first 17 years of my life. I lived on a little island city called Xiamen. It's right across from Taiwan, and the whole city is on the island. And grew up by the beach my whole life. Came back to the U.S. And I didn't get into the hobby until, man, I got to think about it, 2016, maybe, 2015, 2016. And, I always had a penchant for anything doing with growing stuff. I had a fish tank when I was in high school, freshwater. And I'd always seen reef tanks and just thought that they were extraordinary, otherworldly. I played a lot of video games back in the day, and it just reminded me of, something you'd see on a video game almost, just with the vibrancy of the colors, and just, so, always very intriguing. And so my first tank was a DSA, Deep Sea Aquatics, 65-gallon. It was built like a tank. You'd throw it down a flight of stairs. It was probably fourth hand by the time that I got it. Didn't matter. Still was rock solid. And, I just went through the process of learning what it meant to have a reef tank and everything that you could imagine from, starting it off with dry rock, getting every kind of pest you could imagine with the most well-meaning efforts, killing things from dipping them, being overly cautious. I mean, if it could happen, it happened, right?
Yeah.
And it was great because that is how I learn as a tactile learner, is hands-on. And so that really kind of grew me as a aquarist. And obviously, as it goes with all of us, I needed a bigger tank, and that led to another tank, led to a bigger tank, led to, and then the one thing that was interesting for me, though, was right before COVID, I think it was like 2019. I was online. I followed a bunch of coral accounts, and I got connected. There was this one account that was overseas that always had beautiful coral, just the most beautiful coral. And I was always wondering why the coral from that account just looked so much nicer, right? And then that account disappeared for a while, and then one day it popped back up again. Now, I'd had no interaction with this account whatsoever. And so when I saw him post again, I was like, oh, cool, this guy's back. I'm going to see some more new coral, right? So I messaged him. I said, good to see you back in the industry. I immediately got a message back. Who is this? And it's a super cool thing, man. I got to know this person, who we'll call Scooby. And we forged a friendship over Instagram, over coral. He is in Indonesia. And at the time, Indonesia wasn't shipping or anything, right? So we were just friends for the longest time. Talk about coral, showing each other pictures, this, that, and the other. And then one day he goes, hey, man, Indo's going to open back up again. I just want you to know, if you got an import license, I'd make you dangerous. I was like, what do you mean? He's like, do you have any money right now? I was like, not really, man. You need to find some. Find some money. So because of the relationship developed over that year of us just being friends, no strings attached, right? Just friends. I had this assurity, okay, I'm going to try this out. So I set up some big tanks at my house, and I got an import license. And when Indo opened up again, turns out Scooby was not just an exporter. He's a well-connected kind of guy that could deliver on what he said. And so what would have taken a lot of time to do, which is to get the quality, get the order assurance, just all the things that you kind of got to go through in vetting a new supplier, I didn't have to do any of that. He said, all right, here you go. Here's your first shipment, like from day one. And I don't know, man, incomparably nice corals. And so this was my company, that I started in my house. I had to basically put up my old 2006 Toyota Tacoma because the bank was like, "What are you doing?" They'd never even heard of this, right? Like, what?
Yeah.
So they're like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "Well, listen, man. Here's what I'm doing." They're like, "We have no idea what that is." I'm like, "Okay, but I've banked with you for a while." And shout out to North Dallas Bank and Trust, man. Great people over there. They helped me grow this whole thing. I want to give praise where it's due. But they said, all right, look, if you put up your truck against it, we'll give you 15 grand up against your truck. I'm like, all right. And you could say the rest is history because basically, I grew that company to a point where, we were doing some pretty heavy distribution. And then at one point, one of my customers came to me and said, "Hey, have you ever heard of Vibrant Corals?" I said, "Yeah, I've heard of them." Said, "Well, hey, they're in a situation right now where I think it'd be advantageous for you to meet them." And so okay. So I met with Danelle and said, "Hi, I'm." It was kind of weird though because like this would be a competitor, right? But they were having some issues at the time that I could solve, which were quality issues. And so I said, well, listen, I can just supply you coral. So I started to supply Vibrant, and that was they were my customer first. And after a while, it just made so much sense that like me bringing the inventory and them having this giant facility, I was like, well, let's just make this a thing. And so we made it a thing. And the rest is all she wrote. But basically, that's how it all kind of got going. And now here we are in our third year. We've got some really cool developmental stuff coming down the road that you're privy to.
Mm-hmm.
We can't let out of the bag yet. And we're in all sorts of places all around the world. You just talked to one of my suppliers. I've gone to 2 of his facilities already. Every single person that I import from, I have gone to their facility. I've met them in person. I know them, their families. Like it is a relational aspect, and I think it's easy to just, I guess, and certainly this is how I was as a hobbyist. This idea of like coral just comes in, right? And everybody wants that nice piece. Everybody wants good stuff. Everybody wants the prettiest stuff, right? And to a degree, you can kind of demand it on a business level. But what I've found and why our tagline is superior sourcing, true wholesale and superior sourcing, is that the transcendental thing that provides quality for me and for Vibrant is the relationships. So that guy from Indo, well, this is the part of the story I didn't tell you. The first time I met him in person, his father had passed away, okay? He was getting married, and in Indonesia, the father and mother stand in for the ceremony, and they're part of the wedding ceremony, right? So I arrived at this little village out in the middle of nowhere. 15 minutes before the ceremony is the first time I met him in person. He gives me a big old bear hug, and then I stand in for his father.
Wow.
At the ceremony.
That's cool.
And it's just stuff like that like, when I look back on life, like, yeah, I love coral. I love all this. But like, that type of stuff that I believe holds depth and weight. And there's the human aspect of it. A lot of times I think we get lost that there's a true human aspect of what we do and when we want corals, when we want fish and stuff like that, there's a whole chain of events that has to happen with thousands of lives affected, right? That like these divers, and their families, right? The facility workers over there, there's a whole network of people that work together to make this happen. And I believe the more you have your finger on the pulse of that in a genuine way, showing true care, right, and connectivity, what it does is, and you don't do it for this reason, but the end result is you end up being taken care of like family.
Yeah.
And that to me, really, I believe is what sets what we do apart, and what we're able to do is we have that type of connectivity with the supply chain that supersedes just a business deal.
So for those listening that don't really know what a wholesaler does, what is your role in the supply chain when it comes to coral and fish?
Sure. So I am the bridge between overseas and the domestic market. And it's not to say that a person couldn't figure out how to bring in coral, but you got to understand that this is a hobby for us here in the U.S. This is a industry for the coastal communities overseas. And this is people's subsistence, right? This is a business for them. And so reputable exporters want to work with someone who provides consistency and volume in ordering so that they have the stability as a company over there. And so with my ability to, say, order large amounts of coral, order consistently, I get uniform products, I get high quality products, I can bring it in, and then what that allows me to do is then to provide to fish stores the same uniformity and quality. And again, there's some very successful businesses that do this. What I've noticed though, over time is there are very few retail stores that are set up to import and sell well because of the sheer volume of it, the husbandry requirements, and the fact that their job is to run a business. Like they're a retail store. They need to be making sure that all the retail stuff is taken care of. We take a huge pain aspect out of it. And so instead of them having to do the work to find it, figure it out, the huge monetary investment that it is to bring in an order, because you're not typically able to just, I'm going to order 3 boxes of coral from Indo, or I'm going to order 3 boxes from the Solomon Islands, right? That's not, most exporters are going to be like, hey, that's not worth the time of day to do.
Exactly.
So that's a big financial commitment. And your average store isn't wanting to have that kind of overhead parked in their tanks because they need that liquidity to run their business. So I create essentially a supermarket type experience. They come in, they're able to pick exactly what they want tailored to their customer needs without having the risk of the overhead. They can pick what they want, when they want, how they want, without having to, far supersede their budget and take the risk of, because, people ask me, Caleb, do you like to gamble? And no, I don't. I don't go to casino. Like I think I've gone to a casino twice in my life for bachelor parties. Right?
Yeah.
Spent $200 at the blackjack table, but that's it. But I don't need to go to casinos. I play high stakes poker as it is, because when you're dealing with perishables over long routes, you got to be good, and your suppliers have to be good, and the logistics guys, the brokers, they have to be good. Everything has to be lined up exactly right. Right? It's wild that a coral that's supposed to be, in the ocean, or is halfway across the world, and then 36 hours later, I'm unboxing it. That takes a lot of manpower and logistics. It takes a lot of know-how. It takes a lot of connectivity in both airlines, brokerages. I mean, there's a lot of things that go into this that the average person probably is not aware of. In order to make this hobby happen.
Yeah.
Because it's not a domestic product. Aside from the Caribbean stuff that we see, right? The mushrooms and the Rickordia, rock flowers you see out of the Caribbeans, and some of the fish. And you got your grommas, chalk bass.
Small amount, though.
Atlantic blue tank, stuff like that. But it's a tiny amount compared to the international product that's brought in. So basically, it's a long way of saying I make hard easy for stores so that they can concentrate on taking care of the hobbyist.
Yeah. So you had mentioned before that there's a little bit of an acclimation process that you do with the Wilsonite corals, and a lot of those Western Aussie corals are found in colder water, colder to us. Are there any other things that you do to acclimate the corals, or any treatments or anything that you would do when they come in so that they are more conditioned for the local fish store?
Oh, absolutely. And it just depends on the species, right? Oxalic acid is great for dips for things like elegance. It relieves the elegance syndrome that you see where the tentacles start to shrivel up. And that's because elegants are predominantly found in muddier areas. And so when you are taking them off the reef, they're harboring all the bacteria that was in the mud. And when you ship a coral, you can, and it's called a syndrome because we don't know what it really is, but what we surmise is when you get an imbalance in those on the microbes, right? Like the whatever's in the mud is proliferating at a faster rate than the beneficial bacteria that resides on and in the coral, and I think that's what the elegance syndrome we see is. And so the oxalic acid bath that we do has greatly reduced any kind of issues we have with, say, elegance coral. Another thing like acropora. People say acropora is hard. I actually, for me, it's actually once you kind of get it tuned in, it's far less finicky than a lot of these corals that I've found. Once you get it dialed in, but like still the acclimation process for those is, we will line the outside of our tanks first with the freshest stuff so that they get a little bit less light, and then we move them towards the center as we go along. Obviously we use a variety of different dips here just to dip all the coral to begin with when it first comes in. There's a lot of little tips and secrets like blasto. We keep blasto in deep tanks with colder water. They are notoriously hard to ship, and so we found that actually mitigates a lot of the issues we're seeing with blastomussa. Same thing with like meat corals, Cinerina, and the recently renamed Cinerina macassarensis, which was endophilia. All those types of corals, and even when I was diving out there, like these Solomon Island Cinerina, I mean, they were at like 80 to 100 feet, right? And that's it's not super deep, but it's not shallow, right? It's not like your shallow reef stuff like acropora, you get your chalice, lobo, stuff like that you see up there. They prefer, we have found, dimmer lights, colder tanks, and deeper tanks. And so, that's one of those things you just learn as you go. That's been a huge part of our learning process.
Yeah.
And then recently, something really interesting is the use of hydrogen peroxide, which I'm bound to secrecy until we kind of get it really tuned in. But we've seen some very promising stuff with lab grade hydrogen peroxide on certain species. That's really really encouraging.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, that'll be interesting. I think in one of our last episodes we talked to Sean Ono about taxonomy, and in a lot of people's worlds there's nothing more boring than taxonomy, right? But as you mentioned, with knowing the proper genus species, you know where it comes from, you know about how far down it is, you know the conditions that it thrives in. And I think that's something that is missing from a lot of hobbyist tanks, especially with the mixed reef. And I'm guilty of it too. You run it at 77 degrees and just expect everything to thrive when it's coming from all depths
Everywhere
of the reef. So it's good that you guys have noticed that and do that and acclimate as much as you can before that goes out.
No, 100%. And I think your average hobbyist doesn't necessarily need to know all the taxonomy.
Yes, they do.
They don't need to. I would hope that they do.
At least be interested to an extent.
No. I'm not foregoing that. What I am saying is they don't have to in order to enjoy the hobby. However, I think it's responsible to learn that type of stuff. It allows you to give better care to the animals because you understand it better. Like I just said, Cinerina macassarensis. Why it's called macassarensis is it comes from the island of Makassar in Indonesia, right? So now if I know that, I know a lot about, geography. I know a lot about because I've dove there, right? What the water there is like, depths of collection, stuff like that. And it just allows us to be specific about what we're talking about. Like, I'm all okay with you want to call the torch this, that, or the other, but at the end of the day, it's a euphyllia glabrescens.
Mm-hmm.
And as an importer, I need to know all the ins and out of that because I have to deal with the legal process through bureaus like Fish and Wildlife. And everything that I do has to be correct as far as what I report I'm bringing in.
Yeah.
So I need to know all those things. The average hobbyist doesn't need to know, but they should. Well, that's my opinion.
Yeah, no, I'm with you on that for sure. What are your favorite locations to get corals from? I know this kind of all started with Indo, but I know you've also got a lot of Western Aussie stuff out there. Is there a favorite part of the ocean that contains a lot of your personal favorites?
What a good question. Man, that's a really difficult one because there's so much that I like about so many different places. If we're going broad strokes, and maybe it's recency bias, but when I dove the Solomon Islands and I saw the biodiversity there, and I saw, today I'll have a large colony of spliced millipora showing up. When you can see things like that, just out in the wild and proliferating in abundance,
Yeah.
that's pretty crazy.
Yeah,
because I've dove a lot of places, but I've never seen it quite like that in the Solomons.
I think one of my favorite couple videos that Jake did of all time are his Solomon Island videos. I mean, the reef is just so diverse, and it's so many
wild.
different colors, and you see so many of the corals that we have in the hobby in their wild habitat, and it just gives you goosebumps,
Oh, totally. And man, you really see how much of it's like it's a game of Monopoly almost. Like it's all about the real estate. It is when you can look at a 1 foot by 1 foot section of the reef, okay, and the closer you get to it, you will see the most crazy things, all vying for that 1 foot of space, and they're all there together at the same time. From macroorganisms all the way down to like this tiny little like specks that are moving. Oh, what is that? It's a sea star, right? Like, and it's all just trying to live and fight for that real estate. And it could be, contain like one square inch. You could have like 5 different things. It's insane.
Yeah.
Right. In a lot of these shots, I had more fun getting up close, like really close, and just stopping at a point and looking and absorbing it all. But like, that macro view, you see everything, but then you start to zoom in, you're like, oh, there's just more.
Yeah. We talked about that in a podcast too, just observing, taking 20 minutes to observe one little part of your tank. Even better if the lights are off. I did that last night. I didn't sit there for 20 minutes, but I was like, this Red Sea that I've had, I haven't really seen a whole lot of activity from a microfauna standpoint in the display, like copepods, amphipods, mysis shrimp, those kinds of things. And I just took my iPhone and flashed my flashlight in there last night. There's just things all over the rocks. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah. So it was it's one of those things where if you've never looked at your tank with the lights off, it's always awesome. Looking in your sump with the lights off.
Oh yeah.
There's a lot of cool creatures down there too.
Oh,
so
we found a full-grown blue crab in one of our tanks one time.
yeah.
I mean, a full-grown blue crab.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Where did you
And
come
scary.
from? We kept wondering why fish were disappearing from this one tank.
Yeah.
And then we found that there was a false baffle that provided about this much space on it. And what he was doing is coming out at night, and then during the day he'd go up inside the plastic. You never see him until one day someone's, is that a claw? Like,
Yeah.
and we got him out. It was a full-grown blue crab.
Wow. That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I've got in my live sand, I had a what do they call it, a mottled mud crab come in, and they only get to be like 1 to 2 inches or whatever, but I haven't seen that guy in probably 3 or 4 months now, but
It's going to come back as the Kraken.
yeah, I keep on making fun. I'm like, it's going to crawl out of the tank and tap me on my forehead while I'm sleeping. Do you have any thoughts about spawning here in the facility, or maybe that's happened? Maybe you've caught it happening. I know you guys are bringing in stuff from the ocean. That
we get
stress spawning might happen.
We get spawning all the time. We get bags filled with acropora spawn. And I think you got some video when you were shooting a video, but we actually have the tank spawn torches in there, the 24K torches.
Yeah.
So yeah, we see lots of different spawnings, and we try to, when we can, if we can do it, if you can catch the mucus strands with the eggs in them, we try to capture them, put them on a very low flow sand bed just to see what happens. But yeah, we've had all sorts of stuff. Fungia spawn. I say spawn. Fungia leaving babies everywhere.
Yeah.
Acros certainly. I've seen Cinerina. I've seen certainly torches all the time. So yeah, we've seen some. When you run this volume of water on a day in day out basis, it's just always something new, man.
Yeah. Well, I was gonna to further that question. Is there any plans from you guys to actually take that seriously, isolate, try and grow out some spawn, some coral?
I can neither confirm nor deny, but what I can say is
so secretive.
Well, I'm working on a couple things, and I'm a completionist. I want it to be ready to show, basically, instead of just all talk, right?
Yeah.
I want to say what has been done versus what I'm trying to do, right? There's some cool stuff happening, and not just with spawning, but there's some other projects we're working on that are really cool. We're going to be introducing, and then some expansion type stuff as well. But it's all. I got some great people working on some really cool stuff.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I think we've kind of touched on this a little bit throughout, but what are some of the lesser known challenges or complexities that are involved with wholesale that the hobbyist might not see?
Top of the list, everybody wants the 1% coral, and they don't realize that there's another 90% that come in with it that have to be part of your game plan as well.
Yeah.
And sometimes even with retailers, I got to beat it into their head that this ain't McDonald's, bro.
Mm-hmm.
You can't just order a large Sprite with extra fries.
Yeah.
Like, if it's there, sure. But if it's not, the ocean didn't give it to me, bro. Like, what do you want me to do? But, there's a lot of that where it's just like, hey, everyone, of course, wants the nicest stuff. But what I have to do in order to bring balance, right, to what's going on is I have to support the exporters overseas while supporting the stores, making sure that everyone has a fair shot at nice stuff, but at the same time is taking the more regular, common stuff that, goes into a variety of tanks, but may not be that one gem, right? And I deal with that a lot. I deal with a lot of people vying for things that there's only one of.
Yeah.
And so when I think it's a long way of saying my hope is that the hobbyist would appreciate what they're seeing when they see it for what it is. And first of all, how cool it is, even in its simplicity, but the effort that it takes to bring that and to bring it in, to provide that, and, not have the flippancy of like, oh, that's not the most ultra rare thing that I'm, like, and some of that would be a personal frustration.
Sure. And I can understand that. I mean, I think the thing that's always deterred me from the really nice, one-of-one pieces that you might get in is just price, And I've always been a fan of, Dunkin' corals and candy canes and your regular micro musa and all those kinds of like blastos and acros. I've always been a fan of those, just the bread and butter corals, as you may say. But I think every one of these animals has their own kind of unique thing that they offer the reef tank.
Totally.
And until you get to that collector status where you got baller kind of money and all that, then, that's you can still find some really awesome, unique pieces. I think that's why people are, like we talked about earlier, drawn to the mushrooms, drawn to the corallimorphs and the zoanthids and things like that, because they're a little more affordable, but you can still get all that color.
Totally. Rock flowers is another great
Rock
example.
flowers, yeah.
My goodness. The sheer variety is insane.
Yeah.
And it's not cost prohibitive, and that's something that's very easy for a beginner, but it has the full range of colors and variety of some of the crazier corals out there.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think, and maybe it's the nerd in me, but the nerdier you get with it, the more you do this, what I find is you start to really get geeked out about the far less flashy stuff.
Oh, yeah.
Like 100%.
Yep.
Like, there could be a new type of candy cane, and I'd lose my mind because it was just cool to me. And some of that's jadedness in the sense that, like, I've seen a lot of really nice stuff, and, we bring in a lot of really nice stuff. But now for me, as I'm diving and stuff like that, if I haven't seen it before, it doesn't have to be the most banging thing. I just have to not have seen it before.
Yeah.
That uniqueness is cool to me.
Yeah, I've always really attached to coral with story, and like if the coral has some sort of story behind it, where I got it, who I got it from, did it survive, almost dying, things like that. And you had mentioned diving, and you've harvested coral, right?
Oh, yes.
So do you have any of that still in your possession here in the facility, or most of those pieces already gone on to the next phase?
Most pieces have gone on to the next phase. There's still a couple here. I think one of the chalice that I told you about that was inside of a cave that I found, I think I still have a piece here.
Okay. What's that like? Because I think the vast majority of hobbyists will never get the opportunity to go out on a reef and just, take some bone cutters and chop a piece off.
Yeah, no, for sure. And that's where it's like, no one needs to be doing that outside of sustainable collection practices, right? Like, first of all, this is a heavily regulated thing that we do, going through all the proper channels, CITES, right? Like, it's not something you can just go flippantly take a piece of coral off the reef.
Yeah, especially any of the reefs near us.
Correct. However, that feeling of discovering something and being able to choose it and say, hey, like, I found this, I don't know, man. I'm real blessed because you are right. That's not an experience a lot of people would have, and it's a bit ethereal, honestly. It's a bit otherworldly in the sense that, like, it's hard to put words to it. When you are down there and it's just your breathing and it's only your senses, it's only what you see, what you hear, what you feel, right? Like, you just from a psychology point of view, right? A lot of times in therapy, they try to get you into your senses because you can process trauma, bad memories, whatever, in a much more manageable fashion that way, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because you're grounding yourself into yourself instead of your thoughts. Diving is like that, 100%. Everything else disappears. And so to be in that encapsulated moment and seeing a beautiful coral or something you haven't seen before and being able to say, like, hey, I choose out. I don't know, man. It's hard to put words to it. It's a one-of-one experience, I would say.
Sure.
Because you're there.
Yeah.
And so much of today's busyness and life and what we do is just as humans, I think we're perpetually living in the past or the future. And we a lot of times we can kind of abandon the right now. You know what they say, like 1 foot in the past, 1 foot in the future, you're pissing on the present.
Yeah.
And diving kind of forces you to be in the present.
Yeah. That's so true. I've only had a chance to be out a couple times, and there really isn't anything else. I mean, because you pretty much lose all form of communication, right? Unless you're signaling with hand signs and all that, or if you've got an auga mask or something, you can actually talk. But you kind of lose that sense of communication. So. And you're with the bubbles, you're with the air.
Yeah,
I think that's so cool. So, hopefully, at some point in my reef builder's career, I'll be able to hit up Solomon's or Fiji or Indo or Australia or somewhere. I think that'd be
What do you
awesome.
mean? Hopefully, it's gonna. Like, you laugh, but like it's not gonna be hard.
Okay. Well, I mean, for someone who has not been in the hobby for the length of time that a lot of people have that have gone out on the reef and things like that, I do find it a little hard to believe. But I also said at one point in my life when I was younger that I always wanted to fly with the Blue Angels, and that would never happen, but it did, and it's all of my personality. So do not ask me about it, or I will tell you about it. But it was through a radio experience we got the chance to go out on the reef, or to go up in the air, the opposite,
the other reef,
and pull G's and stuff in a fighter jet. So I think that, like you said, anything is possible.
Awesome.
Yeah, so.
Man. I would love to do that. That was probably kind of the same experience as you get when you're diving. You're just like right there in the moment.
Yeah. 100%. Yeah. That's I think a lot of the reason why, aside from the obstacles that we have put on ourselves and the obstacles that are inherently, that come with the maintenance of a reef tank, that's a lot of the reason why I think a lot of hobbyists do it, is to be in the moment and to celebrate these beautiful creatures that we wouldn't normally. I'm in landlocked St. Louis, Missouri. There's no way I'm seeing that out my back door.
Right.
When we were in Australia, we had that kind of epiphany moment of why don't we see more saltwater in these pet stores? It's a lot of freshwater. It's a lot of reptiles and other animals, and it's because they've got that thing, and they got the Great Barrier Reef in their backyard. It's not as novel to them as it is to us.
Right.
So, yeah, I don't know where I was going with that, but you got me in my deep feels now. So, to get back to your facility, what is your testing regime like? Are you throwing out ICPs? Are you doing aquabiomics tests? Are you doing any of that stuff? Or is it just regular, baseline calcium, magnesium, alkalinity, all those guys?
Sure. And that's a great question. I get asked that probably more than any other question. So,
or what's your lighting schedule like?
Oh man, I could go on about that. Okay. So, there's a simplicity to it, and the simplicity comes from the fact that the sheer amount of water volume departing from this facility necessitates the constant pumping of new water, mixing and pumping it into our systems on a daily basis. We average about 200 to 300 gallons per day of water in and out. So people ask me, like, are you water changes? Like, not really. But yes, really.
Yeah.
So that helps maintain a lot of stability. As far as testing goes, 3 times a week on all your basics, and then we do a monthly ICP on top of that, which that's just more of to keep a pulse on things. But when you're swapping out about 200 to 300 gallons a day for this facility, you're reintroducing all the trace elements, largely speaking, that you would need that get used out of the original water. And then, other supplemental stuff was really just the foods. And then we do a trace element regimen that we do on some of the acro tanks. Other than that, all of our alkalinity, calcium, anything like that, we have zero automatic dosing in this facility. Everything is by hand. All the testing is done with hand checkers and vials. And we dose everything by hand. I have found that has eliminated the potential for a lot of problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think dosers have their places for the average person that can't be around their tank all the time or whatever, but we practically live here, so there's no reason that I wouldn't have it to where we can, at a drop of the hat, test, change, do whatever in an unregimented sense based off of the complexities of what we do. I might have 300 boxes coming in, right? And I might have to swap out this amount of water. Like, it's never going to be... It'd be so difficult for me to run things like a calcium reactor or, have calc dosing or anything like that, because we're shooting from the hip here as far as what the day's going to hold, because there's so much variety to what we do, the inbound, all this kind of stuff, that to try to stick to one regimen, it just wouldn't work.
Yeah. You've got boxes coming in today. You got
Correct.
boxes coming in tomorrow.
And the next day, yeah.
Just there's tons and tons of water. That's for sure. So looking forward to the future of reef keeping as a hobby, are there any advancements or innovations that you're excited about? I know a lot of people have talked about AI helping out in some way, shape, or form. That seems a little bit far in the future as far as the reef keeping hobby goes, but aquabiomics is testing the DNA of your water.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not even pretty cool. That's very cool.
Because you just said that you're pretty controller free here, right? So
yeah. So like, I'm trying to think about. So for me, I tend to veer away from less techie, but what I will say is, on a move forward basis, what I'm seeing is a lot of these international governments are really starting to see that the reefs are important for more reasons than they realize. And there's a lot of reclamation and rebuilding. We support a lot of that reclamation and rebuilding ourselves with our contributions and our time overseas. I think that the integration of the measurables for a lot of these areas, and I can't speak too much to it, but some of these areas where they're wanting to, and this is not in Indonesia or Solomons or whatever, it's just stuff that I know about in other countries. They've never had any kind of sustainable fisheries, anything like that, and they're starting to see the detrimental effect of that, because most life in the ocean starts on or near a reef. And so once that is become apparent, there's been a large movement globally on how to take back some of the damage that's been done and through unregulated dumping. It's a huge one in coastal areas. Trawler fishing is in reef zones is some of the commercial fishing in unsustainable ways. There's, again, I don't want to paint with a broad brush. There's responsible, sustainable fishermen, and then there's not, right?
Yeah.
There's responsible, sustainable collection of coral, and there's not. There's responsible, sustainable ways of owning a reef tank, and there's not, right? And so, I don't want to be too polar of a person, but the damage done by those things has widespread effects on the health of the ocean in its entirety. Wide rippling effects. And so when you look at technology coming into play, there's going to be a lot of use for technology and what's going to be done in some of these regions, as far as testing, as far as site surveys, as far as the reef bases that they're going to be making and dropping into the ocean. There's going to be a ton of stuff that I'm going to be a part of some of it, but that I don't even know about, that I'm excited to see about, where we're going to be able to measure and ascertain the best ways in which we need to curb or promote certain behaviors in order to create an environment in which coral will thrive, so that coral can be planted, so that reefs can thrive, and so that life will proliferate, and you'll have the spawning, you'll have fish, and it goes on and on from there, right? I was a little long-winded, but
no, it's great.
Yeah,
that's great. Before we wrap up, I wanted to ask, what is one piece of advice that you've kind of stuck with as a reef keeper? But I want you to tell me that in Mandarin, and then I want you to tell me it in English after that, because I know that we have Chinese hobbyists.
Okay. So 所以你在长珊瑚的时候，你最重要的一点是这个水要稳定 ，KH、pH、CA 这些，只要稳定的话，大部分的问题就会解决。但是你在追这个号码，追这个数字，pH 抬高降下来，然后你一直在追它的话，你的水不会稳定。水不稳定的时候，珊瑚就会不高兴。
It's either don't chase numbers or pH is everything.
No, you're right. You're right. It's don't chase numbers. It's this idea that, first of all, no one's got it all the way down. Okay, this is not something you just like. Yes, you got to follow certain templates of things, but like not one person has perfected this whole thing. First of all, second of all, different regions in the world have vastly different requirements, or corals have vastly different requirements. When I get Red Sea fishing, sometimes the water's like 2.8, 2.9. Okay. And sometimes I get Indo stuff and it's like 2.4, 2.3. And so, anyways, I digress. Point being, do not chase numbers. The one thing that I've learned is if you will just chase stability above all else, you'd be shocked at some of the numbers that as I became a hobbyist and unintentionally happened to my tank, that corals were very happy growing and colored up in. Some of the numbers are appalling.
Oh, yeah.
But because it happened over a long time at a very slow rate, the coral just adapted to it.
Yeah.
So if you will chase stability above all else, it'll solve so many problems.
Yep.
There's not a magic pill. There's not hey, do I need to do this? What do my lights need to be at? Like, yes, there's parameters. Operate within those parameters. Find a happy median, and then just keep it there.
Yep. Very good. Yeah, I started dosing Alpha Reef on the Red Sea, and I was definitely dosing too much of that. My alk went from, 7.8 to 9.5. And I was like, okay, we'll just stay at 9.5. Just, started inching it down, and fine. Now I'm between like 9.2 and 9.5, and the corals are fine, Before I liked 8, it doesn't matter. Just stick with that. Whatever set of numbers your tank looks good at, and just be there.
Keep it there.
Just be there.
Yeah.
Be in it. Caleb, I appreciate your time. Thank you so much for being on the Reef Therapy podcast.
Absolutely, man. Thanks for having me.
All right.